Hey guys, we're here with Paul in his office, and Paul's going to give us 10 top tips for any brewer.
So my background is brewing, and while I work at French and Jupps now and have for the last 4 years, I've devoted the bulk of my career to brewing iconic beers around the world. And I'm going to give you 10 top tips, areas to focus on. So number one is safety. And I think it's whatever industry you're in, safety is always number one. And my mantra and what I've always followed in my career is safety first, quality always. So wherever you are in your breweries, large or small, there are some simple things to adopt and follow. Make sure your team are wearing PPE. Make sure your visitors are wearing PPE, your contractors, and look after everybody. It's not just the brewery, but it's your tap rooms as well. So pay great attention to safety.
All right, and tip number two?
Number two, remember it's a business and not a hobby, especially for you smaller brewers out there. And when I went to the CBC, the Craft Brewing Conference this year, this was a big theme at the Craft Brewing Conference. So focus on your financials and, all the way down through to your process, macro extract loss, water usage, energy usage, effluent costs. Focus on everything. And working for big brewers in my career, the one thing we did every single year is we held a review with the entire team, and we went through every line item on the budget, and we looked to see if we could improve every single item. And it's amazing what you can achieve.
All right, and then we got tip number three.
Cleaning. So cleaning is so important. You think, gosh, that's not exciting. Well, it actually is. And it's amazing what you can do when you get it right and the results you can achieve. And it's, for me, working in large breweries around the world, it wasn't about cleaning vessels, although they're very important. It's getting to the places you can't always see and often don't notice. Biggest learning for me, working in a 6 million hectolitre brewery, brewing the 6th biggest beer brand in the world at the time. We looked at one section of piping from the brew kettle through to the whirlpool, and we opened it up, and it had an inch of build-up, grain build-up inside that entire main section. So we cleaned it, and the beer, it was ranked 63rd in the global rankings for the internal taste panels. And we cleaned that piping, and overnight their beer moved to the top 10. So look after the areas that you don't normally see or get to. Clean everywhere.
And we've got tip number four.
Raw material storage. Look after your raw materials. They are so precious and they're so expensive. So do look after your raw materials. Make sure they're stored correctly off the floor. Try and segregate them. Often, some of the smaller brewers out there, you're working with wonderful flavors, fruits, etc. So try and segregate them away from your malts. Keep everything separate, segregated, but do look after your raw material storage and pay great attention to raw material quality.
All right, and tip number five.
Whole grains. I think, you brewers out there, small brewers, see if you could invest in a small mill. I promise you'll see great results. Milling freshly, as you need to for each brew. And it's not just about malt, it's also about some of the adjuncts you use. So process, mill, grind as you need to use them. I think you'll see less oxidation, you'll have better tasting beers as a result. So try and invest in a small mill.
So fresh is best. And tip number six.
Here's an interesting one. So I would really look at hot time. So you think, well, what is that? So the way I define hot time is the time you put steam onto your kettle to the time you finish work's cooling, and measure it and know what that is. You'll be surprised. So in big breweries that I've worked in, hot time perhaps was as long as 4 hours. And through my career, I would look to compress that. And what does that do? Well, that gives you a fresher tasting beer, longer shelf life, but also it gives you better foam stability. The wins are huge and the consumer will notice. So look at your overall hot time, measure it, try and reduce it.
All right, and we're going to tip number 7.
Focus on that kettle boil. Make sure your kettle is clean. For your larger brewers out there, look at your calandria tubes. Make sure they are all operational and they're not blocked. For all your brewers out there, make sure the kettle surfaces are clean. Look at your evaporation rates. Make sure the evaporation rates are where you want them to be. Know your evaporation rate. Is it 12%? Is it 10? When I worked in large breweries, we took our evaporation rates down. We took them down to 8%, even some lower. But the key is a strong rolling kettle boil. So do focus on your kettle boil, a clean kettle, know your evaporation rates, control that part of the process.
Great stuff. Tip number 8.
Yeast health. Yeast is super, super important, isn't it, to all of us brewers? And, really understand the type of yeast you're working with and what is that yeast going to deliver to your beer. We always say that yeast is the spirit of a beer. And in my career, I've always considered yeast as probably imparting about 60% of the character of your beer is driven by the yeast. So really look after your yeast, make sure you store it well, keep it low in temperature, look at the storage time, use fresh yeast, monitor your generations, look at how you supply nutrients to your yeast, whether you're working with zinc sulfate, look at the oxygenation. Also try and find a way to measure the vitality of that yeast and how viable it is. So do look at ways of looking after the quality and health of your yeast. Super, super important.
Very important. And again, tip number 9.
Packaging. As brewers, we love brewing and we're all passionate about it. But in my 30-year career of brewing, I probably spent a quarter of it in packaging. And I found that I love packaging as much. And it's amazing, some of the wins you can have in the packaging area and what that can do to the final quality of your packaged beer. The consumer will notice. One thing I did in my career was I focused on total package oxygen and really looked at that deeply with my team. How could we reduce that? We reduced it 80%. That's a huge number. And did the consumer notice? They absolutely did notice. And they had fresher beer as a result. So look at every part of your packaging process and try and improve it and optimize it. It's worth it.
And finally, tip number 10.
Know your beers. I think this is so important.
Yes.
So, and what I would call out here with beers is hold retention samples. So keep beers fresh and then retain them for their full shelf life and beyond. If you have a 6-month shelf life, take them out to a year. Really understand how your beer is behaving through its entire shelf life. It's so important. So know your beers, hold retention samples, super key.
All right. Thank you, Paul. That's Paul's 10 top tips. And my 11th tip is happy brewing, guys.